This is a monetary business philosophy. He's going to war with ESG. What's ESG? I want to revisit it because it hasn't gotten a lot of attention in our country, in my opinion. And the attention it's got has been kind of confusing. So hopefully I make it clear as to what my opinion of this is. I want to make my point of this is I want to make my case for why I think Elon Musk is going to war with ESG. And that means that means Elon versus the world. It's not like Elon versus one entity. That's Elon versus anybody you hear say the words environment, social, governance, diversity, equity, inclusion. That's who he's going straight up war with them. And I'm going to start with this part of it here. There's a ton of these investment management firms, not a ton, but there's a large group of them. BlackRock is just one. So I'm just going to talk about just the one to make it easier to explain. They have more than $10 trillion in assets under their belt. I've seen even more they have some type of proprietary software that the assets, the companies that use it, they don't control the assets, but BlackRock made the AI and the algorithm for it. So they kind of have control of those assets. So if you count everything they have, I think it's over 10 trillion. Elon Musk doesn't even have his 1 trillion yet. That's just one of the asset management firms. They're so big, they've got more money that they're managing than the GDP of every country in the world except for China and the US. So they make it known, this company, BlackRock, makes it known, we throw money, if you're public, we invest. If we don't invest, then obviously you're not going to do as well because we're the ones putting trills up. We don't talk about billions, we talk about trillions. So if you don't do this credit score that we like now, ESG, then we don't give you money. That's what it is. It's just like the mob, but disguised with the color of somebody's skin, disguised by the environment, disguised by obedient governance, obeying the government. This is straight off of the BlackRock website. The practice of incorporating ESG will help us make decisions to help enhance risk-adjusted returns. That's a fancy way of saying get on your knees. Elon's going to war against this. I talked about Showtime and their programming, and BlackRock invests into it. Substitute Showtime for Twitter. BlackRock's gotten bailed out by the government just recently. They used them to buy the debt of all the companies. I don't know if it was all the companies, but for companies that were struggling due to the pandemic. And then, so they bought out the debt to help those companies out. And then the government, taxpayers, American taxpayers, bailed them out. So that's literally fascism. So I don't know how people are using these terms, racism, fascism nowadays. That is fascism. Government linked up with private companies, and you don't know who's in charge. You can make a case that BlackRock is in charge of the government. I'm just saying you can make the case. I don't want to upset the overlords. Companies get high ESG scores for a lot of things, not just race swapping characters and stuff like that. That's a minor thing. But it's hiring practices. For example, they go after the boards of these companies and they say, you don't have enough representation, LGBT or Latinx or color of skin. You don't have enough people like that representing you. You know what? You're going to need to pick this person that's down with us, and they fit an identity group. They're going to have to be on your board. It's very similar to China that has a member of the Communist Party in most major companies, like literally in the company, to make sure you guys are obedient. If the money runs out, they get bailed out. It's a racketeering scheme that's perfectly legal It should be unconstitutional, but they're doing it in plain sight. That's what Elon Musk is going to war for. So for me, sipping bottles right now, what that really is like is in Game of Thrones. Remember they were having that party before the battle at the wall? They knew that they were in a crazy battle. And they knew they were going to be casualties. And this is not a hot battle or anything like that, but they were having their drinks and partying, even though they knew they were going to get into battle. And that's what this is. Musk can always say I did Johnny Depp's wife. Thank you for the $10 D super chat, D Oliver Elliott. This is serious. This is the battle that Elon Musk has chosen. I will be honest. I said it before that this isn't the path that I wanted him to take. This is not the path I wanted Elon to take. And Elon's much smarter than me, obviously. So I'm just giving you my pleb opinion that really means nothing. The reason why I didn't want him to take this path, because I didn't think Elon could go up against ESG. It's just too much. He's literally going up against the world. Literally. Anyone who supports ESG, from the globalists all down to our government, are again now. I don't know how he's going to pull it off. He's outmanned. He has a lot of friends in high places, but unless he has friends that I'm not aware of in the globalist agenda that can kind of shake things up, this is a tough battle. So there's no guarantee that he's going to win this. He's risking a lot for this because they'll do anything to take you down. Any type of false flags, any type of setting you up. This is way orders of magnitude, to use one of Elon's phrases, orders of magnitude more dangerous than running for president. You're like, somebody runs for president like Trump and all them, like Biden and Trump both had allegations against them of bad things, doing bad things to women. When you get up to that high, Brett Kavanaugh had it. There's all kinds of, and I'm not saying it's true or not true. I'm just saying that's when the closets get looked into. And there's going to be all kinds of stuff going into Elon Musk at this. If you look at ESG, the Twitter, every company, so just go to Twitter or Google Twitter ESG. They all have this governance resources type of website. Every major company has it. If you want money from BlackRock and Vanguard and Morgan Stanley, you have to. This is not required from the government. This is required from BlackRock and them. ESG is not a government requirement. We don't vote on what that is. So they put this in here and they talk about it. This is all the impact report of the environment, health. We want people to feel safe on Twitter. So that's why you see the reason why Babylon Bee got suspended was their misgendering was considered violence. And I want Twitter to explain it, but in the past, I want them to explain it now. But in the past, they have said because certain groups are more prone to harming themselves when bullied or anything like that, we need to protect them health-wise. And that's why we consider it violence. So I did the TikTok where I said, if misgendering someone is violence, then why isn't calling Candace Owens a white supremacist violence? Because you're racially identifying her. The reason why is they won't say it. I want to force them to say it. The reason that I've seen is some groups are more prone to harming themselves than others, so you don't get protected. That's their justification. This very small part of this ESG, look how big, it's a lot to it. It's big. It's huge. You look at the people and culture here, it's inclusion, diversity, all your key words. You go into they have a separate report just for inclusion and diversity. And this is Paramount, all these major companies have this. It's kind of scary when you think about it, because if the markets were truly free of ESG and control, and I connected ESG to the government indirectly, every company wouldn't have the same report. They wouldn't be reporting on the same things. This is not a requirement. There's no requirement to report on this type of stuff other than to get money from these big companies. So they talk about genders, who's the representation. Now, it's not all bad. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, this is why people call it communism. It's like you're really being forced into the same belief system. So you look at some of the organizations that support Twitter. I just want to make sure I'm backing up my point that he's going to war with ESG. This is the company he bought 9.2% in. So I think there's a list here that I saw of all the companies, and here's all the companies in here. And nothing, I'm not going to say anything against them, but I'm just listing them off. They're all leftists, left-leaning companies. All of these companies in here go straight up to war with Donald Trump and MAGA. This isn't a diverse. They talk about diversity. There's nothing diverse about this from that standpoint, from the standpoint of ideology. There's nothing diverse about this annual report. So for Trump, for Elon to have to let Trump back, if he's about free speech, he'll have to do it. Or I'm going to just, I think a lot of people are just going to slam him at some point. He'll have a little honeymoon period. He'll have to sell his shares. Every one of these organizations is 100% against Trump. And when I say against Trump, don't get caught up with Trump, the name Trump, and like, oh, I'm against Trump too. No, what it means is they're against populism. They're against populists. They're against the people. That's what that means when I say they're against Trump, they're against MAGA. Trump doesn't have ideology. He's a mascot that represents people who are like, we want control back. Just common people. They're against that. All these groups are. So that means Twitter is against that. You see how this happens. So you wonder, how does Trump get banned from Twitter? How does Trump get banned from Twitter? How does that happen? How does it tie back into the government and everything else? So you look at let me see if I can find. So you look at the top owners of Twitter. Who owns Twitter? Number one, we know is Elon Musk now. Let's just look at the top 5 shareholders of Twitter. I'm going to put that up on the video here right now. I'm not looking at the chat right now, so I apologize if I miss any tweets or any chats. Top 5. Number 1 owner, this was as of January 16th. So the number 1 owner was Morgan Stanley. I'm probably waking my wife up. The number 1 owner is Morgan Stanley. They are wealth management, just like Vanguard, just like BlackRock, number 3. Asset management, they run $6.2 trillion. They own about 9.2% outstanding shares at this time of this article. So you wonder, why would you buy 9.2%? He wanted to it looks like to me he wanted to outnumber the number 1 investor. That's going to war, period. There's no other personal person I'm talking about here in this top 5, I don't think. Yeah. It's all these capital management asset firms. Elon's like his own asset management firm. But he can't mess with them. Look at this. Morgan Stanley, $6.2 trillion that they control. Vanguard, $7.2 trillion. We're not talking about billions anymore. That's how much Vanguard controls. We talked about BlackRock, about $10 trillion. State Street Corp, $3.9 trillion. I'm talking about the assets that they control. Elon can't go to war with that. Do you see why I didn't want him to go down this path? But since he is going down this path, I'll pick up a stick for you, bro. I don't know how I can help you. I didn't want you to go down this path. I wanted you to go down a private, because when you're a private company, you don't have to deal with these. Now it's going to be harder for you to get big. Like Daily Wire would never become CBS. Maybe. I wanted Elon to maybe work with a Daily Wire, work with Gab, and kind of pool the resources together and do something private so you don't have to worry about these guys taking you out. I mean, if they need to take down Twitter, they'll take it down. I mean, these guys here were like, we don't get what's a couple trill to us. I mean, we'll tank Twitter. He's in dangerous grounds. So after we pop the bottles, you see how dangerous it is. Let me show you. So we're looking at Morgan Stanley here, right? That's the number one. And I accuse these companies of being anti-Trump. Look up every single one of these companies. They're all into ESG and they're all anti-Trump. That means anti-populist. Every single one of them. These big investment management companies. So after J6, looking at, well, hey, what's going on with Morgan Stanley? How's Morgan Stanley doing after J6? Let's take a look. A quote here from Tom Glosser, Morgan Stanley's lead independent director. This goes beyond the politics, talking about J6. A lot of businesses people don't want to get involved because they don't want to bring politics into the workplace. That was in the before times. Remember when it was taboo to talk politics in the workplace? And then in the before times and the after times, it's only taboo to talk politics if you're on the wrong side. All of a sudden, George Floyd was a topic to talk about. All of a sudden, Black Lives Matter was a topic to talk about. All political. You just couldn't be on the wrong side, or it might be hard to find a place for you at a company anymore. Morgan Stanley was no different. This is the previously number one investor in Twitter. Morgan Stanley singled out members of the Congress. Oh, why did I do that? Let me read that again. Morgan Stanley singled out members of Congress who opposed the move to certify President-elect Joe Biden's election win, pausing his contributions to them. So they're taking a political stance. And ESG, when did ESG's been around for, I forgot when it started. It started a while ago. ESG started a long while ago. It just started popping off really big recently after Trump, and it took crazy off into the social part after Floyd, after J6. So for Elon, if you're really about free speech, none of those top 5 Twitter shareholders that we talked about, none of them, Morgan Stanley, Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Pine Capital, none of them give a damn about the Constitution, the First Amendment, and populism. Populism, that's their enemy. They look at you like a cockroach that needs to be exterminated. They'd rather keep you around, but as long as you're not messing anything up. That's what he got into. And you see my concern there.